Okay, hi everybody. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Get Into It with Gila. Today I have with me Haley Goodrich. Hi, Haley.
Hi, Gila. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Thank you for joining us. I have been following you for a long time and I love your work. So, if you could just tell the listeners who you are, what do you do, where do you live?
Yeah, and it feels like we know each other as well because we've hung out in Inspired Speakers for quite some time and gotten to know you there. So this is such a treat to chat live or record this live. But my name is Haley Goodrich. I'm a registered dietitian and eating disorder dietitian in the greater Pittsburgh area. And I have a group private practice on the eastern suburbs, and we treat eating disorders through a health at every size, social justice informed lens. So we're a specialty practice, and there's a group of three of us clinicians doing the outpatient dietitian thing, and we love it. That is one part of my business. The other is mentoring dietitians who are also in the same boat, whether they're in entrepreneurship themselves or, seeking ongoing guidance and support and training to become eating disorder dietitians through supervision. And our group I co-founded, Inspired to Seek. So I hang out there a lot as well, producing trainings, CE opportunities for dietitians as well.
Wow, that's a lot.
It
That's a lot of
does kind
things.
of sound like a lot.
Yeah. Okay, so did you always know you wanted to be a dietitian?
No, actually. I always think this is such an interesting question, and sometimes I'm like, how did I end up here? But no, I don't think I actually knew what I wanted to do specifically for a really long time. Even after I graduated with my bachelor's, I figured something in the wellness healthcare field for sure, and was leaning toward med school for a while.
Oh, med
Did a
school.
lot of shadow. Yeah, and I did a lot of I really liked the ER setting. Did a lot of shadowing in the ER setting in undergrad, and liked it. I didn't like all of the paperwork that doctors would spend time
Mm-hmm.
doing, and the high liability, and
Mm-hmm.
um, the insane schedule, and commitment to another like 8 years of school. So there were some things that was like, I don't know if this is it. And at the time, I was really into running and eating in a way that I thought was really health promoting, and thought, well, I've mastered this and I'm good at this, and I can help other people do the same thing. So sort of entered the field of dietetics the way that I think a lot of dietitians do, thinking that health and wellness looks a certain way and they've sort of mastered it. And I already spent so much time myself really in this area. Why not make it my career? So I think that's what pulled me in. And so there was a little bit of my own stuff, disordered stuff there, in pulling me in. However, it's exactly where I needed to be, because this is, I love what I do. I love working in eating disorders. So kind of a long answer to your
No,
question.
I have so many more questions about that. So, did you grow up in a family that like promoted like weight loss or diet culture and stuff like that? Were you like surrounded with it?
It's interesting because my earliest memories was our house was completely food neutral. I grew up in Texas, um, and we regularly had things like ice cream. Like that was, I have a lot of memories almost every night after dinner, like going with my dad to the freezer. The big ice cream there is called Bluebell, and we always had Bluebell ice cream. Like that was really normal. We always had pancakes and bacon on Sunday mornings. My dad made breakfast for us every single morning. So I think that I'm really fortunate and privileged in many, many ways. But one of them was, my earliest memories are really a very normal relationship with food. Um, my mom did do a lot of dieting, a lot of her friends did. So I can remember, getting a little bit older through junior high and high school, and just as everybody else sort of is, being surrounded by diet culture. But I'm, again, just so fortunate because none of that was really pressed upon me by family members.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably in large due to just the fact that I am in a genetically straight sized body to begin with. There's,
Mm-hmm.
Nothing was flagging me at the pediatrician's office or, with friends or family that I was quote unquote growing too rapidly or too big.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, I had that preservation and protection just by genetically the size that I am.
Thin privilege, we'll say. Yeah,
Exactly. That's
yeah,
it.
definitely. So was it like when you got to college that you started to run, or when you got into like eating healthier, paying more attention to what you eat?
Yeah, totally. And I think that, really, if I look at I've got the perfect wiring for sort of textbook obsession with trying to control food and body, and very much that type A and high anxiety. And college was such a transition from a tiny high school in Texas to a major university as a freshman. That was just such a big transition. And I think, anything, I was sort of grasping for straws, as most of us do, anything to kind of help me feel regulated and calm my nervous system and feel like I had some sense of control when I didn't know what I was doing at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I think things just kind of escalate from there.
And you lived in a dorm with other girls?
I did, you know what? I did live in a dorm my freshman year, and then moved into an apartment for the remainder of my undergrad college career. So I always
So,
had like roommates and
right.
yep.
So is that where you started to like compare your body to other women's bodies, or it wasn't really like that?
Yeah. No, I think that is, you know, really common in the college scene, but I think it was more so of um, if I don't know exactly how to do the school thing perfectly or what that's going to look like when I graduate, then there's this one thing I can do really well. Like I'm just going to pour a lot of time and energy into this and becoming the healthiest that I possibly can and running fastest and farthest that I can, that I that'll be good enough. Maybe then I'll feel like I fit, like I'll be good enough. So I think it was more, again, probably because of the thin privilege, more of like a internal, like personal battle almost with myself.
Mm-hmm. So were you like, was there a lot of pressure in school, or you put that pressure on yourself? Like the school, like to be top of your class, let's say top
Yeah.
of.
I think I put that pressure on myself, just being naturally a perfectionist. That is in my genetics. That is always who I've been, which sort of probably gives us insight into why I chose entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a go-getter. I'm one that needs to constantly be achieving and doing the next thing, and that is fulfilling and feels good for me. There's a lot of family influence there too. My dad, also an entrepreneur, and while my parents didn't push us like really, really hard, there was still kind of this unspoken expectation of like what achievement meant, I think, in our family. And so that, paired with my kind of natural wiring, neurobiology, set me up for like, how much can I possibly do and how fast?
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. I want to
Yeah.
talk about the entrepreneurship. I want to hear the whole story, like how you came to be. So you started. So then you became a registered dietitian, and had you heard about intuitive eating, health at every size, like while you were in school, or that came afterwards?
Actually came after. So yeah, I graduated with my bachelor's in biomedical science,
Oh
still
wow.
without knowing what I want. Like I did not have a job when I graduated. I
Oh
was like,
wow.
still lost. So I went back to do all my didactic coursework
Oh
when I
my
was like, oh,
gosh.
I know. Felt like another 2 years to,
Yeah, it's a
all
lot of
those
work. It's a lot of work.
didactic classes.
Yeah.
Luckily, I had all the like
Stuff.
biochem and
Right.
exactly like those were still transferred over and everything. But no, all the way through the didactic coursework and even into like my internship, I had not heard of intuitive eating whatsoever. I was still very much
Me
in the
neither. I didn't hear
traditional,
about it either.
yeah, completely traditional programs, traditional training. Even our classes we had didactically, there were ones where we would, gosh, it's so disordered thinking about it. They would give us a recipe and say like, how many substitutions can you make to make this like low fat and like low calorie? And that was like assignments that we did, which is so strange. Or like tracking our own food, like the calories. So very traditional dietetic training. And then somehow, and every time I do an interview, I'm like, I'm a little fuzzy on this, but somehow during my internship, I came across the intuitive eating book. And just read it on my own. Like it was not part of the curriculum, my rotations, nothing like that. And just started kind of like telling the other interns, I was like, have you seen this? Have you read this? And so my like self-learning kind of started there, I think, in my internship. And I remember giving a lot of pushback actually to our like some of the preceptors and our like internship director, getting really curious and asking a lot of questions about some of this stuff. And it was definitely just blown off at the time.
Oh yeah, definitely. I even remember contacting like old professors and being like, hey, remember that class, medical nutrition therapy, like that you gave us? I'm like, have you ever heard about intuitive eating? Because I'm confused how this is. Like, I was just shocked. Like, and she was like, yeah, I've heard of it, but I'm like, I just don't know what to say. But I think we've all, yeah. So you just stumbled upon it and it clicked, or you were still on the fence?
I think, yeah, I did the fence sitting thing for a while. Again, this was like this would have been pre any Facebook groups that as we have now, like with as professionals, how we all connect on like Instagram and Facebook. Podcasting was like not a thing. I mean, sure, podcasts were around, but not like how you are producing this wonderful like there was none of this. So I think I thought I was doing I think I was like, oh yeah, this totally makes so much more sense. This is how I'm going to practice. My first year as a dietitian. And I think I genuinely thought, I'm doing this intuitive eating thing. I'm still weighing people. They still have a weight loss goal. I was still missing disordered behaviors left and right. Like I look back and just want to kind of cover my face, like, oh my gosh, I was so unprepared.
We all do that.
And yeah, and of course, with a lot of compassion for myself, just trying to do the best I could, not being near as prepared as I should have been. So yeah, I think I did that for a while, and then slowly through learning more, finding more training, learning about health at every size. That was kind of the next. I think a lot of dietitians describe intuitive eating, that framework kind of being their gateway intro, and then you start learning a little bit more about weight stigma and weight science and all of those things. And I think, yeah, I went into private practice very early. I started as a newly minted dietitian. I had a job as a clinical dietitian for a few months and really hated it. And I was kind of panicking. Hospital. Yeah, like on the med surge floor, sort of following up on like cabbage procedures. For your listeners, that's just like heart bypass, heart surgery and things like that. You would see like a lot of wounds and malnutrition and sort of following up on that. And it just wasn't my jam. And I kind of panicked and thought, I've like chosen the wrong career again.
Yes, I was exactly there. What did you hate about it? I'm curious.
It felt like it wasn't actually making an impact of any kind in the clinical setting. And I don't know how much it's changed over, the last 10 years, but it was optional for doctors to read our notes. Like we would do all this work. We would do, full malnutrition screens and put in our recommendations, and they may or may not even read the note. Same with, you would put tube feeding recs in, TPN recs, and they're in there, but the doctor could also just say like, no, here's what I want to happen. And so it was sort of like, you would see people for 5 or 10 minutes. They may or may not know you're there depending on their state. And then you would do all this charting.
I know.
And it may or may not ever get looked at. And so I was like, what is the point? So I think that was, I needed a lot more like one-on-one interaction too with people. Like I was not getting that with folks either. Maybe, they'd send you in for an education for a new diabetic patient, for instance, and maybe you got 10 minutes with them, but you never get to follow up with them or really get to learn more about their life. And that also like didn't feel very good.
Right. I remember when I was in undergrad, and I think it was my first MNT, medical nutrition therapy class, which I loved, and the professor was saying, like, if we don't take our job very seriously and we don't, like, I guess, like, over chart and over assess
Mm-hmm.
the medical needs, the nutrition needs, then you could sort of like phase out the dietitian and the nurse could do that. And I'm thinking now, like, I guess this was like, I don't know, 5, 6 years later, you kind of could. Like, you
Yeah.
kind of could. Like, I don't mean to, like, I don't mean to offend any dietitians who are listening and if they like clinical, but I felt the same way and I did it for 5 years. Like, I
Yeah.
worked in a nursing home, but I just felt like, the state mandates every 3 months for a nutrition assessment. So you're just charting and charting and charting. And the residents who you're seeing may not want to even be seen.
Yeah.
Just mandated. So,
And they may not want an education,
right.
and yet you have to go give it and like then chart that you did it. And I think clinical dietitians are absolutely necessary, but like you said, the way the system is set up currently, they're undervalued majorly.
Yeah.
And there's so much, like we have such a much greater capacity than what is happening,
Right.
What we're seeing in the clinical setting. So I think I was ready to like get out of there quickly. And I thought, well, I'll just start a private practice. I had zero business experience.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So
Kind of
how?
compulsive.
So wait. So how many years ago was that?
This would have been in 2014. We're in 2021 now. Yeah.
So 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay. So 7 years ago. So and like you said, there wasn't like now any dietitian who logs into Instagram is going to be encouraged to start their own practice, right? But 7 years ago, I mean, I don't remember ever knowing anyone my age,
No.
for sure not, who was starting a private practice, for sure not intuitive eating private practice. So
Mm-mm.
so what happened? Like what? How? What? When? How did you do that?
I literally just opened a Word document, and I think we were flying somewhere, my husband and I was like, I'm just going to make a list of all the things I would need to do to open a private practice. Like, this is not a formal business plan, nothing. And
You felt confident though, or you were just was
no, not at all. I was just like, what do I have to lose kind of thing, I was like, this has to be possible. I know people do outpatient, like I've heard of private practice.
right.
It has to be possible. And there wasn't a lot of encouragement from, like, I remember telling some of the dietitians I worked with at the hospital, and they were just like, my gosh, you have to first have been a dietitian for X number of years. You need to have made all these connections with all these doctors so that they'll refer to you like this. Like, you can't, this is not smart.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, that's really helpful. So of course, that's not the advice I give now to folks going into private practice, but it was a rocky first year. I was just learning trial and error as I went, and feeling really alone. And that's sort of where Inspired to Speak, that community for clinicians, started to evolve, because I thought, I never want another dietitian who wants to do this to have so few resources and feel so alone and not have some sort of mentorship around this. So it was out of my own selfish need for what I had needed that year.
So how did you do it? Like, did you where did you start? You started contacting doctors, or how did you even know to do that?
Yeah.
Like, you did research online?
Yeah, I was just Googling around. I found an office space for rent. Found an office space for rent. I knew I wanted to accept insurance. Had no idea what I was getting myself into with that process.
I understand that, yeah.
Just started filling out the paperwork. There were lots of tears because and I remember
I know
the paperwork, and you're just not prepared for how awful the insurance system is and like what you're getting into. And I'll say, like, now that I'm where I'm at, I can say it's totally worth it. It's just kind of getting everything set up that's so tedious and painful. So there were many times that I was like, no, not doing this. I'm just going to be private pay only. And luckily I just kept going, figuring out as I went, like, the CAQH and things I was going to need to do, like what an NPI was. Luckily, I did have just the intuition to set up a business entity correctly. My husband and I sat down with a lawyer and an accountant and just said, like, what do we need? Like, we need a tax ID. What do we need to do to make this like an actual business entity before we get started? So I somehow just had that intuition that those steps needed to happen, which made at least applying to be an insurance provider a little bit easier because I had my EIN or tax ID and could very easily then get an NPI. So it was just like literally one step at a time. And I think the first client found me maybe through their insurance, because certainly my website was not anything, so I wasn't getting any hits, Google hits or anything. And I'll always remember that first client. It was interesting now that I think back. But yeah, so I think I grew very quickly too, which was unexpected. And that in part is from accepting insurance, because that's how people can find you.
Yeah, I will say that for dietitians listening, that I also take insurance, and it was a big decision. I think in the beginning, I was just like, well, I don't have any money, but I have time. So I'm going to spend the time, credentialing with the insurance, which is a huge, huge, huge headache. But it's like, I spoke to some people who take insurance, like a dietitian and a therapist, and they were like, you have to do like, they went through like an hour worth of stuff, and then they're like, then you're basically done. So like, I use Simple Practice, my electronic medical record. Is that what you use?
I actually use Calyx. But I'm very familiar. Yeah, very familiar with Simple Practice too.
Because they like, you don't have to create. They kind of like automate your insurance form.
Yep.
So I was like proud of myself for paying extra money to like delegate something. Like I can't
Right.
do the tech stuff is like so not my thing. So like I really do feel like it is worth it to take insurance, like for people who are on the fence about that. But that's a big decision because it's like there's so much more involved with insurance.
Yeah, it's a bit of a learning curve. Everything from the lingo, which I mean, I didn't know any. I was like confused what a deductible was,
Yeah, I'm confused about that, but yeah.
Exactly. Everything from the lingo to the steps of submitting a claim, and yes, now our EMRs make that so easy on us. Yeah. Glad I got credentialed though.
Do you have to use Calyx and Office Ally or just Calyx?
The way we currently do it, we use Calyx and then batch them a couple times a week, all the claims that have been created, and they go through Office Ally, which is a clearinghouse.
Right.
And that's just because we take so many different insurances that it makes the most sense to use a clearinghouse where they can do all the work for us to get them to, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Aetna, Cigna. Yeah.
So do you take all insurances?
Most major insurances, and our local insurance here is UPMC, or University of Pittsburgh Medical Center insurance. So we take that as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the first year was rocky, but then after that, your practice really grew.
Yeah, I would say it grew starting about, I had a handful of clients there the first few months, and then about 6 months in, I think, is when it really started to grow. And I left my clinical job just to be full-time private practice, and was a solo practitioner there for a couple years before bringing on the first associate.
Wow.
So cool to think, like, to look back and think about it.
Yeah. So what was that like for you to like go from like a handful of clients to like a full-time caseload?
Yeah, more adjustments for sure. And I think around that time I had started to hear about supervision, which is, again, a brand new concept that was not something taught in my traditional training. So that came into my sphere just in time. I was growing and trying to figure out how to not only be an entrepreneur, like, wear the business owner hat, but also to grow as a clinician, where I was really wanting to specialize in eating disorders. And so I knew I needed more support and training there. I think this is what is the most challenging, and probably one of the biggest questions I get now from dietitians is like, how do you grow your practice as a business owner and still keep up with CE and kind of wear all the hats at once. And I think that is the dance we do as
Hmm.
entrepreneurs.
Definitely. So you felt that getting supervision was like a huge step for you because you had like the support that you never really had.
Correct. And it was a light bulb moment of, oh, I don't have to pretend like I know everything. Like it's actually acceptable where I'm at to not know everything and to be able to ask someone for help and support.
Especially since you started your practice literally right out of school.
Exactly. Yeah.
So your practice was growing, and then now you have this other wing to your business, which is helping other like new dietitians like myself. So how did that come to be?
Yeah. And so that Inspired to Seek has gone through quite a few um, changes, has evolved over the years into what it is now. It was originally, and I think those original modules are still on our website, but it was originally just a step-by-step 6 modules, how to set up your private practice.
Mm-hmm. Which was good,
From
yeah. Which was great.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, they're just simple, still there. And so that
Something that I
was,
found on your website was like health profs, and I'm like, duh. Like, how did I not know
yeah,
about that? You know?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that was the first, kind of the first bit of support that Monica and I put out. And then from there started just, seeing what people needed, what our community needed, what kind of support, and started creating like monthly CE around weight inclusive practice and entrepreneurship. Um, yeah, and the Facebook group really grew. I mean, it's several thousand dietitians now, where it started out as like 50 dietitians. So
Yeah.
it's kind of cool.
So what was did you have any like pushback in like the dietetic community or the entrepreneur community when it came to like your approach, your intuitive eating approach?
Hmm. Yeah, lots of pushback over the years. I think that's been a skill in itself. Is how do you continue to strengthen your foundation and stay aligned with your values, how the way you're wanting to practice, despite someone else maybe having a different opinion, or giving you some criticism, and how do you not just crumble under that criticism and say, okay, this is what just was thrown at me, I got to keep going. And that's a skill, especially for, I think back where it was really hard for me to take criticism of any kind, right? Or to not be the people pleaser, or to not do everything by the book, quote unquote, by the books, right? Um, yeah, I could see my confidence waver over the years, um, until I had enough of those skills and, strong foundation to say, like, I'm really confident in that this is how I want to practice, and this makes the most sense. This is the most ethical to me,
Mm-hmm.
and evidence based. Yeah, so I think for dietitians listening, if you're in that place where you're still kind of wavering, confidence wise, like, gosh, this is hard to swim upstream and go against what everybody else is doing. You could probably echo the same thing. It's hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard.
It is really hard, and I think like as you were talking, I was thinking like what really strengthens it for me because I still have my moments on the fence is
Yeah.
listening to my clients' stories of like when
Yep.
they were put on diets as kids or how much they hate themselves because of their weight. It's just
Exactly.
crazy.
Once you get into practice and start actually seeing what's happening in people's lives, you listen to their stories, you watch the work that you do together over time, it's impossible to go back.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible to do something else, anything else.
Right. But it is the thing is that on a constant, probably daily basis, your belief system is questioned, which is really you really do have to have like a strong foundation because I probably have at least once a day somebody being like, but it's not healthy to be overweight, but it's not
Mm-hmm.
but I want to be healthy or like eating cookies can never be healthy, and I'm like sometimes I'm just like I don't want to talk about this anymore. Like just go read the book. It's like hard. It's really hard.
Yeah, and you have to think about your career in a way of like, how do I not want to burn out?
Right.
Like, what is going to keep this fulfilling and really make this a long-term thing. And so you can't let every single comment that comes to you on Instagram or Facebook or from colleagues, you can't take the time for each one of those and give them a full schooling or education. Not that it even would be well received. So it might be a waste of your energy. You have to start to pick and choose and think, how can I make the most impact without feeling or getting defensive or using all my energy in a way that's not going to be productive.
Yeah, that's a really good reminder because like I do get questions sometimes like and I'm like I can't answer this, and then I'm like,
And
wait, they're
answer
not
it,
gonna
yeah.
believe me, they're thinking I'm dodging the bullet, like dodging the question, but like I'm like, I just can't answer that again right now. It's too frustrating.
And it shouldn't totally be on us either. People need to have to do there's so much internal work through bias and um, stigma that we hold just as humans. That's internal work. It's like you or I can't do that for them anyway.
Right. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Um, so I wanted to ask you one more question. So what led you to eating disorders versus like when you started practicing, you were thinking, oh, this is like I really need another credential, or you were drawn to the because eating disorders is different than just
Totally different.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I think exactly what you were saying earlier. I got into it wanting to use my intuitive eating skills with clients and help them get off the diet train and, just really improve their relationship with food. But as most clinicians again see, it becomes blurry. There's such a spectrum of disordered eating, and it's very easy to all of a sudden be into a clinical eating disorder when you're working with clients. Like, because diet culture is so strong um, and pervasive, much of a clinical eating disorder can also be seen as, using air quotes again, healthy behavior. And so I started, as I was learning a little bit more from lived experience of clients and learning more about what like is a clinical eating disorder, I thought, wow, there's a lot of people that have eating disorders that are getting missed.
Yeah.
As I'm learning to screen and kind of clinically see what's out there, I'm thinking there is so much of this population that is underserved, that is invalidated, that is completely skipped over and made worse.
Mm-hmm.
And that is so wrong and unfair. And so, I've got this activist kind of fire within me. And so it was sort of just the next natural progression of, I'm going to learn as much as I possibly can about eating disorders and like do my part to help give people the support that they need. And I just became fascinated with eating disorders and loved, as I got a little bit more, more experience and into the work a little bit deeper, loved it. And so that's where I really niched down.
That's awesome. Yeah, you're right. There needs to be more of a
Yeah.
voice, more of a support for people who have an eating disorder, who have an undiagnosed eating disorder, who are glorified by their eating disorder.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really it's a hard pill to swallow, honestly.
Yeah. I'll
Okay,
say
so
it's not for everyone either, right? Like I
yeah,
have a ton of colleagues who I adore their work, and they're staying more in the disordered eating, intuitive eating space is really what lights their fire and it's fulfilling for them, and I think that's incredible. Also,
yeah. To be honest, I'm still on the fence. Like I really enjoy
yeah,
the intuitive eating, disordered eating, like staying there, but I've done some eating disorder work, and I really enjoy it, but it's heavier, it's much heavier, and you're right
yeah,
about the boundaries and about the burnout. Like you want to make sure to preserve. I mean, I have 3 kids also. Like you want to like I have to preserve or conserve or whatever the word is. Like I can't, it's such a heavy load to carry that I want to
yeah,
be the best mother, wife, and practitioner that I could be. So like I don't know if all practitioners are trained like that, but it's 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 like it's imperative. Like it's impossible to practice well slash also be a good spouse and parent when you are carrying such a heavy load. It's just impossible.
yeah. I think it's spot on, and I think a lot of people need to hear that. That balance, it's different for everyone, and ultimately it's going to be what is sustaining for me and what's most important to me in life, and where do I best excel, like spreading, without spreading myself too thin.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was so much fun. Thank you so much for joining us. Where could the listeners find you?
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for this conversation. It's so fun to think back over to take pause, especially during kind of with everything going on in the world right now. It's nice to take pause and um, zoom out and kind of look at the big picture of things. So I really appreciate that, and I love just our casual conversation around entrepreneurship. I hang out online quite a bit, so listeners can find me at HGoodrichRD on all major social media platforms: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. If you're a clinician and you're not already in our Facebook community, come join us at Inspired to Speak.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for all the work that you do. Thank you for your activism. Thank you for caring enough to like hold the torch, because it is swimming upstream, and I value everything that you do and everything that you put out there.
Thanks so much, and I love your podcast. Thanks for doing the work. I know how much work it takes
Yeah,
to produce a podcast, so I love this.
I really enjoy
Thank you.
it. I really enjoy it,
Yeah,
and I think everyone has to hear this message. So thank you. Okay, have a great day.
you too.
Okay, bye.